You're listening to Big Cast, your source for financial technology innovation, with John Best. Did you know that the Big Cast Network now has an app? Just search Big FinTech Media in the Apple App Store and listen to all of our Big Casts offline today. It's free.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of the Big Cast that is an extra bonus, which we've never done before, which is here only exclusively on the web. And with me is Glen Savardy. Hey, Glen.
I guess this means people got their special download codes when they bought the vinyl, and now they're going out for the bonus material. Correct?
Download codes on vinyl? Are you crazy? There was nothing. You know what was in my albums? There was the liners, which was awesome, but there was like maybe you could join the fan club. But no, this is bonus.
There were probably some seeds stuck in the spine there.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, because you could use them for that. But hey, we're in Colorado now. This is a special episode because you did so many awesome recordings when you were at Finovate that we ran out of time on the podcast. And so for people that were interested, we've got this webisode for two of the other interesting companies that you found.
Yeah, and the first one up is a company called iExceed, small I-Exceed. And the thing that really caught my attention with them, a couple things. One is the whole value proposition makes sense. But at the very beginning of the presentation, the gentleman started off by saying, we've heard a lot of really interesting new things about cutting edge technology. I'm now going to bring you back to reality. And the point being that most banks are dealing with relatively old systems. So getting these new ideas into market can be rather daunting. So their approach is to try to work on the quickest possible implementations through what they're referring to. Actually, their platform is AppZillion. And the idea is kind of a micro app store. The platform will allow an institution. The larger ones can do their own development and use the platform to get it out quickly. Smaller institutions who probably don't have quite the level of resource at their disposal, there's a micro app store out there where they can choose from the best of breed that have already been made and do quick implementations on those. So that's the basic concept, and we'll get into more detail here from this interview.
Glen Savardy here at Finovate with Anshu Nair of iExceed, who did one of the more interesting presentations I saw this morning around the notion of micro apps. And I like the way you started off the presentation about bringing us back to reality. In a presentation, or a whole day around innovation, the reality of it is that you've got a lot of banks with a lot of fairly old systems.
First of all, thanks, Glenn, for the time today. We really appreciate that. You touched upon a very valid point, and that's the point we were trying to make in the morning session as well. Most of the people are kind of focused on what technology can do for the banks, and yes, there's some great technology and great features available in the market space. But what is the ground reality? That is a bit different from how it exists right now in terms of banks having legacy systems. And those legacy systems are running on old technologies, or even in the digital space where banks are running applications or apps which are kind of built on technology which was 5 years or 6 years behind. So from that perspective, there is a bit of a challenge in terms of how you have all this modern technology coming into play, and we have seen that technology keeps on changing day to day. There are new features and new enhancements coming on a regular basis, and how those can be incorporated onto the legacy platforms, that is a real challenge. So on the practical side, it is extremely difficult for banks to kind of make use of the technology in the most efficient way. Theoretically, yes, it all looks fine. Mm-hmm. It makes perfect sense to have and use all these components. But practically, the challenge lies in integrating those components and making all these things work in unison.
And this is where your product, or your platform, I guess we call it Epsilon, comes in, correct?
Yes. So our focus has been to kind of make sure that whatever platform or back office application the bank is running on, we make it easier for you to integrate those back office applications and ensure that there is a seamless transition between the back office application and the front end, which is built using the back office application, thereby ensuring that everything is in sync. So any changes to the back office application by using we use RESTful services to kind of auto generate and build the screens. So we make sure that whenever there are underlying changes to the APIs, especially in the banking space, that is something which is very, very common. The changes to the existing APIs would result in an auto refresh, or would result in an easy refresh of the screens. And the platform has inbuilt intelligence to identify the new elements which have been added as part of the updates to the existing APIs, thereby making it easier for the developer to incorporate that. Specifically in the case of legacy applications where there is no APIs available, we can build APIs using RESTful services, or we can directly connect to the database, and internally we convert that into a web service and use that as the basis for the screen development.
So yeah, one of the things you mentioned, your value proposition is to shrink the development life cycle. And one of the other things you mentioned about that too is you dramatically reduce the need for testing, because this is really a bolt-on at the top level. Can you say a bit more about that?
Yes, so we have introduced the concept of micro apps, the micro app architecture within our platform. What are micro apps? They are essentially small functional units which are built on top of each other. They may be independent, they may be completely independent. So they are functional units which could be independently tested and deployed. So the idea is that you enhance the reusability of the code and you localize your testing effort. It's not as if there's no testing effort,
right,
but you localize your testing effort to that micro app itself, because you're not touching the other portions of your app. So what that means is I could have a single base app which could have 15 different micro apps built into it. So if I'm adding a 16th micro app, all I need to do is make sure that the 16th micro app itself functions correctly. So from a testing standpoint, my effort is localized to that 16th app itself, and I don't have to worry about what happens to the 15 apps which were already in place. So this approach is quite different from the traditional approach of doing it as a project and then embedding that within the project.
Right.
Because when we were to do it that way, we would have to do a regression testing of the entire app per se. So this way, the usage of micro app enables me to localize the changes which are being rolled out to a single app, and thereby ensuring that the effort to test and deploy is reduced drastically.
So as I understand, you're in market today with about 50 financial institutions, and those are primarily outside the U.S., correct?
That is correct. We have about 52 clients using our platform globally.
And they tend to be larger. And from what I understand, you can really use the platform two different ways. You can develop your own apps, or you can use the ones you've already posted on your micro app store.
Yes, so we have both the systems in place, both the deployment options in place. We typically tend to license our IDE, which is Epsilon. We also have the option to license the pre-built apps, which is the Epsilon Digital Banking Suite. So depending upon the needs of the bank, basically most of the banks tend to license the platform and use that as the basis to build and develop apps.
And that's more likely a model for the larger institutions,
yes,
the bigger development shop. And given that we have a lot of credit unions listening, they may be more likely to be working off the shelf, right?
And that's what we have seen in the marketplace as well. The bigger enterprises always tend to prefer that. The smaller enterprises tend to go with the option of basically licensing the IDE and using our services to build the first 10 or 20 apps, and then once they are comfortable with the IDE, then they do it by themselves. So for that also we support that model as well, wherein basically we have a mobility consulting team which supports ongoing implementations of Epsilon for smaller customers who are not able to build the apps on their own using our platform because of varied reasons.
Got it. So one last question. Obviously, you're here in New York City, so you're looking to enter the U.S. market. What's your approach, your go-to-market approach in terms of U.S. banks, larger ones, community and regionals? How are you going about it?
So we are okay, and we are hoping to increase our base here in the U.S. You are absolutely right when you say that we seem to have a lot more clients outside the U.S. Our focus is to and that is our aim as well, to increase the client base here in the US, and we are making concerted efforts in that direction. As regards the size of the bank or the financial institution, we are completely agnostic to that, and We are extremely open to kind of having smaller credit unions adopt our platform, use our platform, because we feel that it will be a great enabler for them in terms of meeting their digital needs, as well as basically catering to larger banks which have a bigger IT presence and a bigger system presence,
Right.
and bigger ecosystem of peripheral systems to kind of build and use the app. So we are open to both the models. We are open to all market segments within the banking space. Of course, it is much more easier from a sell-on perspective. Nothing is easy from a selling perspective. Let me correct myself over there. But what I see is, relatively speaking, it is much more easier because the bigger banks have much more exposure
Sure.
to different technologies, and they are much more open to adopting new ideas and new things. Not to say or not to be disrespectful to any of the smaller banks. So it's kind of a catch-22 situation.
But
that
you've
way.
got a model for the smaller banks to participate. That's
Yes,
the key.
so we are completely game for kind of even much smaller banks and credit unions to kind of adopt our platform. That would give us more credibility in this market,
Yes.
because we can build upon a sizable customer base,
Exactly.
and that is what we are looking for. And obviously, we have signed up a few big US-centric banks as well using our platform, but there is no stopping us from kind of signing more clients and onboarding new clients.
Great. Anshu Nair from iXE, thank you very much for your time. How do people get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
You can visit us at www.iexceed.com, that i-exceed.com,
I-Exceed.
exceed.com, or you can visit www.appzillon.com.
That's APP.
APPZILLON.
Got it.
We have our regional office here in Princeton, New Jersey. So at any point of time, please visit our website. You will have the information for contacting us, and we look forward to hearing from you.
John, I know you like this idea quite a bit.
Yeah, I've said all along that we have to, basically what they're doing is, and it's interesting because he came up with a new marketing spin for something that's a very old idea, which is the enterprise service bus. And now he's using some of the new fancy lingo, which is microservices. If you look around, that's all you hear now is microservices. And, but these micro apps to go with the microservices, it makes a lot of sense. And basically what he's saying is let's have one integration that will bring you many features. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And to me, this is, we've talked about the OpenFI concept on this show before. To me, Fedor, which is a bank out of Germany that has something like this. And, I think this is a very smart move on his part, because what I see that banks are going to be part of more than one of these. I think that the way it's going to work is that you may be part of several of these, of these kind of marketplaces where you can, get these apps, and the apps may be part of several marketplaces. And the whole goal, it's kind of like the video game industry, right? There's a system that's called Unity, and what Unity is, it's a programming language. But if you program in Unity, you program your game in Unity, then you can port it to the Xbox, you can port it to the PS4, you can port it to the Wii U. You can get sort of all this value out of one code base. And in this case, it's similar but different in the sense of you're getting all this value out of one integration. And I think it's interesting.
I think it's interesting, too, to kind of following up on your thoughts there. There's kind of two schools of thought out there. You've got kind of the big, back office service providers for banks and credit unions, the FISs, the Fiservs, and the Jack Henrys. And, there's been an ongoing wave of consolidation in that space. And I think there's one school of thought that says, you're working toward the single source provider who can integrate all this stuff for you and make it turnkey. But, as you're pointing out, and I think there's an awful lot of evidence that the thing is really moving in this direction, is, the number of new startups that are turning out these new innovative solutions is just so rapid.
Right, but they can't connect to all the legacy systems. They'd love to get out there.
But it's also so much faster than anybody can consolidate them by continuing to buy them. So I think you're right. That's the end game is much more likely to be the latter, where you've got this, this wide expanse, and you've got to figure out a way to work all in concert.
Which is why I think that they should switch names with the next one. That's just my 2 cents.
Endor?
Yeah. I feel like that the previous product should have been called Endor, and this one should be called iExceed.
So this is Endor, Endor, and it's a couple of, I believe they're still affiliated, not ex-professors, but even current professors from the MIT shop. Obviously, a lot of interesting ideas coming out of their labs. And they work on a concept of social physics, as they call it. But what I really kind of boil it down to.
What?
Social physics.
Okay.
That's what they call it. This is an interesting application to me. And I think that, from a big data standpoint, it's definitely the idea of harnessing a wide array of information that's at the disposal of not just financial institutions, but other types of consumer packaged good firms and things like that. And their idea is through natural language and a very simple query process, getting at actionable insights from that information as quickly as possible. And they do not look to market it directly to the end user. They're looking for more of a B2B solution here, working with inside people in product shops, communication shops, marketing shops at the different organizations. And there's still a human component to working on that, which you and I have talked about as well. I think is always going to be the case, that there's definitely the need to make sure that you've still got the human touch as well with the automated aspects.
Well, let's hear from them.
Glen Savardy here at Finovate with Inbal Taraj, the VP of Product for Endor, who did a very interesting presentation yesterday on their predictive software platform. An MIT spin-out focused, as you say, on social physics. Can you say a bit more about exactly what that means, please?
Right. So the two co-founders of Endor are Professor Sandy Pentland and Yaniv Altshuler. They spent years at MIT together developing a new technology, which is called social physics. It's a new branch of artificial intelligence, kind of parallel to machine learning. Mm-hmm. And it enables us to completely automate predictive analytics. Professor Pentland and Yaniv Altshuler discovered that in any human event dataset, transactional datasets, there are some mathematical patterns that are guaranteed to be embedded in the dataset. That's the basic finding of social physics upon we were established. We leverage that in order to use these mathematical patterns, which we turned into mathematical equations, as a prior on our customers' data. So we basically take customers' raw transactional data. They don't need to clean it or process it in any way.
Just dump it all in.
Right. So it needs to be structured, transactional raw data. They just upload it to Endor, and the Endor engine automatically applies the mathematics of social physics on that data. What we get in return, and it's a complete automatic process, are clusters of people who are behaving in the same manner. So every time the customer refreshes the data, the social sphere of the data is being refreshed, meaning we are getting hundreds of thousands of new clusters of people that are grouped together since they are acting in the same manner. Some of these clusters are based on static things, which machine learning can also detect, like people belong to the same family or they work in the same company, they live in the same zip code, therefore they are taking similar decisions. But hundreds of thousands of these clusters, which are updated like on a daily or weekly basis, are completely dynamic and has to do with something that happened to these people lately, in the recent week or in the recent month. People got promoted, therefore they are changing the way they behave, and we can see it from their transactions. It's not explicitly mentioned in the data. It's not like the customer got now a new column which says people who got promoted, right? But the data shows that these people now need to be grouped together because they are acting in the same manner. People got fired, or maybe there is some kind of construction in an area which causes everyone to look for alternative solutions. Or maybe there is some kind of a new heavy advertisement near your company, which makes everyone pursuing specific products. So we don't really know what ties these people in the real world. It's not really in the data, like defined in a specific column, but we can understand it from the data that something has changed and these people need to be grouped together because they are now acting in a similar manner. For example, we are now at Finovate. We are probably we are grouped to the same cluster if we are in the same data set, because we are acting in the same manner. We use the same Wi-Fi, we kind of talk to the same people, we do the same transactions, the same web searches, and so on, okay? So once the social sphere of the customer data is ready, and that's a completely automated step, which takes a couple of hours, we can hit the new clusters with any predictive question across the organization. Therefore, we don't need to build models.
So I saw yesterday you had there were 3 boxes where you could kind of structure your question that way. Those questions, are that a standard format for Endor, or that's customized by the individual client? How is that set up?
So we act as service providers. We like to work with the business users directly, have them asking us, their use cases or specific questions, and we will come back with the predictions. Therefore, we don't bother them with actually populating these boxes. We do that as service providers, but I wanted to illustrate what we do behind the scenes and show how easy it is to ask a new question. We don't build the model. Once the social sphere is ready to go, all the questions that the customer already asked in the past are renewed on the new social sphere, and the customer is automatically receiving these refreshed predictions. And whenever the customer has a new question that they want to ask, and usually it's like 10 new questions or 30 new questions for another PM or someone at the organization, we just open the query builder, which is a simple wizard that we built, which allows us to just SQL the question in a manner of out of population X, who is likely to do Y in the next T time. So that's how I basically fulfilled these boxes just mentioned. Out of all customers active in the last month, who is likely to take a short-term loan if approached next week? And the question can also get much more complicated. We will just open more such boxes. Out of all customers who were active last month, and also eligible to take a loan, and also eligible to take a loan above $300,000, who will take a loan next week if we will send them a coupon 20%. So
and we would potentially, this wizard, the screen, it would be available through a portal. I mean, you distribute this out to loan officers, in theory, at a financial institution, product people. Anybody who has reason to be asking these questions would have access to it on their desktop.
So the way that we do that is that we use this wizard behind the scene at Endor. Because the business users don't want to compose an SQL question. They just want to ask us a question, and sometimes it's a generic use case and not a very specific question, and they want to get the predictions back. Okay, so we don't, even bug them with going through defining the questions. They should just tell us we need to ask about short-term loans, and they will give us a short description about people who are active in the last month, in the last 2 months, in the last 5 months, and we want to predict 1 week forward and 2 months forward, and we will construct the question.
Okay, so they don't enter it into the screen themselves. They provide it to you, and you make sure that it's asked properly.
For customers who want to do it themselves, we can probably do that in the future. Right now, we just see that customers just want to get quick predictions and the most accurate predictions that they can get.
And the point that you made before, quick being the key, as I understand, you're returning results in a matter of less than an hour as compared to a day or a week or something like that.
Right. So we treat data completely differently than machine learning. Okay, we build the social sphere, and then we hit the social sphere with any question that we have across the organization. All the questions that the organization already asked are being renewed immediately, automatically, in no time. Okay, but all the new questions that you want to ask, basically it will take us half an hour to get the new report. Now, the time to market here is essential, not because of the technicalities that it's fully automated. That's nice, but the impact on the customer is that they don't have any issues of predictive scale. Because what's happening today is that customers have an internal data science team, and they keep growing the data science team because it brings a huge value if you can predict who will take a loan tomorrow, who will increase online transactions, and so on. So machine learning requires the data scientists to go through a process of asking a very specific question, defining a very specific question. Then they need to collect the data. They need to clean the data, which is taking 80 to 90% of their time, which is a shame because these are really talented people.
Yeah, and that's not the best use of their time.
Right,
exactly.
It's not. And then they need to build a model for each specific question that the organization wants to ask. So, and then the models start to degrade immediately, and they need to maintain the model. So this process is really not efficient. And at the end of the day, the impact on the company is that there is a certain capacity that the data scientist can handle, and the organization wants to be much more predictive and ask much more questions. So that's where we come in. We don't replace the data scientists. We don't understand the semantics of the data. Therefore,
you augment.
Right. So for use cases in which you need to understand the semantics of the data, deep dive fraud use cases, then the data scientist would be doing a better job. But whenever it's human behavior decisions, like who will take a loan, who will respond to a specific marketing activity, who will go digital, who will go on mobile, and so on, that's where Endor excels.
Gotcha.
And we just enable customers to ask hundreds of different questions without any issues of predictive scale. They will get the prediction immediately, and at the end of the day, our customers are changing behavior, because today they are used to prioritize predictive projects with the data science team. And they're not asking a lot of questions which can boost their performance because they need to prioritize. And with Endor, they are being trained to ask whatever they want, to have the freedom to ask whatever they want without prioritization. So they basically boom us with hundreds of questions.
What is the revenue model on that? Because they're actually contacting you each time they have a question. Is it a subscription-based model where you're on call? I assume you get a certain number of queries per month, or how does that work?
So it's basically a yearly license in which the customer can ask unlimited number of predictive questions.
Okay.
It's a tier-based pricing, and the way you go from one tier to another is based on the questions that you want to automate and get again and again on a daily basis or monthly basis. So basically, as of tier 1, you can ask unlimited number of questions, because that's how you discover the golden eggs that are going to boost your performance.
And you figure out, and then you automate those and continue.
And whenever you will tell us, look, question number 1, 5, 100, 250, that's the ones I want to automate, that's how you can basically pay and go up in tiers.
So it's interesting. So it's kind of machine learning being done by individuals. They figure out which ones are the valuable ones to follow up.
Right, because whenever you have the freedom to just ask whatever you want, you get a lot of reports back. You need to figure out how you want to act upon it, because the prediction works as much as the follow-up action. If you don't follow up on the list that we give you, nothing will happen, right? So usually the company can't really be active about all of the predictions that they wanted to get. Mm-hmm. So that's the key. They need to decide what would generate most revenue, and then they basically ask us to automate these predictions, and not on the Endor platform. These predictions will be connected with APIs into their systems, their marketing and sales systems, and the relevant people will get these predictions every day, 7 a.m., once a week, whenever they want it.
And obviously this is very valuable for any big data sets. And you mentioned before, natural use. You work with credit card companies, for instance. You work with financial institutions. And also, this is not specifically for the financial field. You're working with consumer goods companies as well, right? It's any place with big data, essentially.
Right. We work with large e-commerce companies. We work with companies who are competing with Amazon on predictive analytics and want to be very precise in boosting their e-commerce activity. And we are also working with credit card companies and retail banks and consumer goods companies.
Is it scalable in a way if a smaller institution would like to get involved too? You've got pricing that can be feasible?
Yeah, I think that the key that the company needs to ask themselves is whether they have the need to get Endor in, meaning whether they have a lot of predictive questions that are not being answered today, either because they're too small and they don't have enough data scientists in-house and they don't even want to they want to outsource this capability, or they're extremely big and they have hundreds of data scientists in-house, but still they can't get enough.
And use them more effectively. They want to make sure that they're putting their time where it really is valuable. Can you say just quickly a bit about the implementation process? I mean, how much of an effort is it to get Endor linked into the data they need?
So basically, there's not much effort because Endor is working with the raw data of the company. So we use raw transactional structured data sets. The customer needs to upload structured transactional tables into an S3 bucket in Amazon Cloud, and the Endor engine process the data over there. So we usually work with a business champion who has predictive questions to ask us, and we work with someone from IT who can upload and refresh the data. We don't really need to work with data scientists because there is not much sophistication on the customer side in order to work with us. All they need to do is ask us predictive questions and upload raw transactional tables into the cloud. These tables are completely hashed and encrypted for security reasons, and we don't need to understand the semantics of the data.
Great. If people want to learn more about Endor, how do they get in touch with you?
So Endor.com, our website, and my email, inval.tirosh@endor.com or inval@endor.com. And I think that one more thing which is interesting, for our customers is that two things maybe. We are completely agnostic to language.
Okay.
So customers who want to expand their predictive analytics to other regions, India, China, Japanese, we are completely agnostic to the semantics of the data and therefore also to the language. And another thing is that we can predict based on very little history of data. So whenever you launch a new product or you have a new campaign, and after a few days of launch, you want to understand who is likely to use this new product.
You can get effectiveness data pretty quickly.
As long as we have more than 20 past examples of the behavior that you want to predict, we can already predict who else is likely to do that.
Wonderful.
So, yeah.
Well, Inbal, thank you very much. Very interesting stuff.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
See, I think they got some really interesting things going on. And I mean, I find it interesting that they really do take still a high touch approach and, take basically saying, hey, try everything. Let's get as many different ideas out there, fail fast. If they yield no interesting results, just throw them away and move on. But really having a bit of a curation aspect through their own people who have seen some of this data before. So you're not having to re-educate people on the front lines every single time. And maybe somebody who could kind of play Sherpa or, whatever, facilitator, whatever word you want to use, to try to get them to, kind of refine their queries to come up with some good actionable insights.
Yeah, I think if I have money, which I don't, but if I did, and I used to have a lot, but now, Bitcoin's so low now. I'm just kidding. I still got a lot of Bitcoin. But let's say that, these are types of solutions that I would look for in the sea of things. Because like iExceed, and I think this is why you pick them too, you see these as being foundational services that lead to other features and systems. Am I right?
Exactly. They are not marketing a end user feature, Endor. So I mean, it's actually staking out a relatively unique space relative to what we saw over the 2 days at Finland.
Yeah, both of these guys are. Both of the ones we did here are.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, I hope people enjoyed this short little webisode. Hopefully it wasn't too long. Thanks, Glenn. Thanks for putting this together, man. And thanks as always for going out to these things and making it all happen. Go out, subscribe to the Bigcast, click on the links below, and we thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Got a question or want to join the conversation? We'd love to hear from you. Tweet us at Big FinTech. Email us at info@big-fintech.com. Or visit our show notes and comments at www.bigfintechmedia.com.